The March 25th, 2024 Laramie Planning Commission meeting. Clerk, roll call, please.
Matamore.
Here.
Heisel White.
Here.
O'Toole.
Here.
How do you say Sylvie's last name? Chair?
Priscilla. Here.
Priscilla, thank you. Schneider
Here.
and Moody.
Here.
We have 6 present and 1 vacancy.
Okay,
Chair.
we're good to go. Are there any changes to the agenda, or do we have a motion to approve the agenda as presented?
So moved.
Madam Moore approves. This is their second.
Second.
Second from Jake. All those in favor of approval say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. Seeing none, agenda is approved. Do we have a motion to approve the March 11th meeting minutes as presented?
So moved.
Madam Moore, is there a second?
Second.
Second from Donald. You Sylvie, gonna have to be quicker. All those in favor say aye of approval.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed say nay. Okay, minutes for March 11th are approved. Next order of business are citizen comments, non-agenda related topics. No action will be taken. Is there anyone out there on Zoom or in the audience that want to talk? Seeing none, we will move on to the next item, which is Planning Commission and staff reports and comments. Derek, and you have anything you want to add?
Yeah, give me 1 second here. Let me look up something. Fair Commission, just a quick announcement. Earlier today, we did do a pre-proposal meeting for the North 4th Street properties. And did tours of the site. Currently, we had 2 firms show for the pre-proposal, and then we have had quite a few other inquiries from other people throughout the country. And so we'll continue to kind of monitor that situation. Our hope is that we, see proposals on April 18th, which is when they're due, and we'll kind of go from there. So I've just made that announcement a couple times. And then I guess a second announcement, if you know anyone who may be interested in serving on the Planning Commission, we do have an open spot. And so have them reach out to me or to the clerk's office, and we can get them an application and see if we can round out our board. So
Okay. Jake?
Then pre-proposal, was it mandatory or was it?
No,
It was.
yeah, it was not mandatory.
Okay. Were the firms, local firms or?
No.
Mr. Chair, if I may,
Yeah.
I was going over the RFP and it's still unclear to me, is the animal control going to move out of where it is? Or is it going to stay there for the time being? And it doesn't appear to be in the lot line definition.
Yeah, Chair, Commission. So we left it very open within the RFP. Someone could make a proposal and relocate them or not, but all that has to be wrapped into the proposal. That's weird. And would just need to be wrapped into the proposal. So we're just working on the sound. There we go. That was it. I think it must have been like, yeah. And so what we didn't want to do is we didn't want to box in any potential developers in terms of that they had to keep that facility, the Parks and Rec facility, or the youth crisis facility. But we also wanted to encourage them to consider that as part of their proposal, and that maybe through phasing, maybe redevelopment, we don't know, that they could be maybe relocated, maybe incorporated into the larger building or a different building or something. So we tried to keep it open, but it does have to be addressed. So, and it could mean that they just stay as is. Yeah.
Any other questions? Okay, thanks, Derek. All right, next item is, oh yeah, Joe.
So as you all know, we're doing a West Side Vision study with our student interns from Colorado, our University of Colorado. And we're continuing that off with another session on April 1st between 11 to 1 and also from 5 to 7 p.m. This first session that we did was primarily focused on getting responses from people. And this next one is going to be primarily focused on giving some options, seeing what stick and what doesn't. To better get an idea of what we want to do as far as codifying anything or, maybe a less heavy-handed approach. So, yeah.
I saw something in the paper about like historic preservation, sort of, I assume would be sort of like keeping the character of that west side was one of there was a sort of an overwhelming desire from respondents for that.
Certainly, yeah, that was part of that first one. But there's also a separate study going on to look at that area as a national historic zone or district, primarily culturally, not architecturally focused. But that's through the Albany County Historic Preservation Board and not through us. And there's separate studies going on. So we did hear in our first session that people were interested in historic preservation and the history of the West Side, but we didn't. We're trying to incorporate that, but that's not the bulk of what we are doing.
Interesting how that would dovetail into planning. Yeah.
And I think to add to, just for anyone who might be listening or gets on and listens to this later, is that during that work or during those meetings, they're going to be really focused groups where they're going to go to different stations, and we're going to be really focused on certain topics during this meeting to try to, like Joseph said, really draw out some conclusions and some ideas related to maybe some kind of tough topics too. It's not going to be all just fun and games. So
Where's it at?
at the Lincoln Community Center. So right there, just on the west side. So be ready to talk and engage if you show up.
And
You
when
will
is it
not be
again?
able to just sit by.
When is it again?
Yeah, so it's April 1st between 11 and 1. We're having two sessions that day. First one's 11 to 1 and the second one's between 5 and 7. And it's kind of an open house format. If you come a little bit later, you're probably not going to miss much, but you can just jump in where you can.
Great, thanks.
April Fool's Day.
Ruh-roh. Okay, next on the agenda, stormwater focus group update. Tom.
Well, they seems to me they probably. I haven't got the paperwork yet, but they've determined a plan on how to raise this money. I will not be able to attend. I don't believe I will be able to. I think if we can make Donald, if he's willing, our official representative for that. I have real issues with what they're trying to do. I just don't see how they're going to get the money they need to even do the minimum. What they'll need is probably a $25 a month increase per utility bill across the board. I mean, on a flat fee basis, that just about barely gets them the minimum amount of money. I having had my property flooded twice, I would be happy to pay $25 a month to have it not happen again. And I'm sure there are other people. I'm just concerned that it doesn't become a political issue. It should be an infrastructure issue, not a political one, but I'm afraid it might become a political issue. The other concern I have with it is there's still have on the table, but they seem to be shying away from it more, was an impervious surface fee. I don't know, for lack of a better word, that's what I see is they want to talk, they're talking about it somewhere as an impervious surface fee to me would be a burden on existing commercial properties more than residential ones. And it would be, I think, a serious detriment to any future development. I mean, we require a commercial developer to have so many parking spaces per square foot. And then we're going to punish them because he uses asphalt on those parking spaces. So, I see a dichotomy on that. I'd like to see what they've come up with as a final plan, but that's where it stands right now. So, if don't want to take it away.
My impression was, I thought they were leaning toward the impervious surface thing.
Yeah.
Was that not your impression?
Yeah, I think they're talking about that. I don't see how they can possibly get enough money just from an impervious surface fee. And it's just not enough asphalt in town to do that and get them, what did we figure? As I recall, it was something like they're gonna need 3 million a year just to do the minimum. And that the only way they can get that is on the water bill.
The advantage I thought I saw of doing the impervious surface was people with small homes and a small parking area. It would be prorated basically on the size of the lot. And I thought, well, there's an element of fairness there. I hadn't thought about the business side of things in terms of punishing businesses, but maybe they could set a separate rate for businesses.
Oh, I'm sure they would have to. I don't see how they could do it across the board. Most home developments still have backyards, that they can drain into. Your roof water and stuff can drain into it. Who was it? Told me they figure about 700 gallons a year from melting snow and rainwater on an average 2,000 square foot house will, can be pretty much contained in a good sized backyard. But what you get at the old Kmart parking lot, Lord only knows. I mean, that's a significant amount.
I got the impression that they were sort of pushing that way because so many other communities had gone that way.
Well, I know there's a big fight over it in Montreal right now. Is having a big fight on an impervious surface fee. And that would be terrible. I mean, that's a pretty big city and it's pretty much all covered up to start charging people for that. But they're also charging for commercial rooftops as well. So they're looking at the entire structure and the parking lots and everything else.
It seemed like they would have to see whether that's a good thing to do for a community like Laramie, that
Yeah,
size, the type of development and so forth.
I just don't see how they're going to raise enough money to do it just with a impervious surface fee.
Is the purpose of the fee to simply raise the money for the infrastructure, or is it to reduce the need for infrastructure because of increasing infiltration? Or
No, it's strictly to repair, maintain and build new infrastructure.
stormwater
Yeah,
system?
stormwater
Okay,
system.
wasn't sure. So it would be in perpetuity that you would be assessed that fee as long as you had impervious
Well,
surfaces.
If they go with the minimum, it'd be 50 years to build out what they want, depending on inflation.
But the backstop is that it goes to the city council and the city council can reject it, right? If they think it's a terrible idea.
Yeah, it's all up to the city council, but pay me now, pay me later, the work needs to be done. They just have to figure out how to do it. And be equitable and not stifle development. So that's where the impervious, where the stormwater system is. We'll see what they come up with at the next meeting.
Jake, are you gonna be at the
I
meeting?
will be, yeah, but I will be there as county chair.
That's right. We should say, propose that Donald be our representative for that meeting.
What's the date?
The 4th, I believe?
Yes. So that's 4th of April.
Yes.
Great. All those in favor of Donald being our representative on the 4th?
If we could get a motion, Chair.
Oh,
I moved that Donald O'Toole replace me as the official representative for the meeting on the 4th of April.
is there a second?
Second.
Jake second. All those in favor of the
Aye.
motion, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, say nay. Okay, Donald, you're the man. Okay, all right. Next item, disclosures, ex parte communications, potential conflicts of interest. Anybody have any issues? Okay, seeing none. current planning projects, we have some old business. We have the project Z-23-06 Cornerstone Apartment Zoning Amendment. And how we left that at that postponement meeting was we had a motion by Matamore and seconded by Schneider to recommend that the city council approve an amendment to the city of Laramie's official zoning map, rezoning approximately 14.5 acre property on the southeast corner of Beach Street and Boulder Drive from O district to limited business district B1, according to the findings of fact and conclusions of law. In the postponement that was voted on, approved, there were three aspects that we asked staff to provide additional information. One was a map showing the non-developable area of the parcel related to the stormwater facilities and the area most suitable for development. Another item was, in addition to the map, would be a modified staff report from planning that describes the consideration of open and public space in the context of this parcel. And finally, that information would be presented at this March 25th meeting. So, Joe, take it away.
Chair Commission, we're going to try something out a little bit different. You guys usually do not see a PowerPoint from us, but we're going to try it on for size and see if this works a little bit better for illustrating some points and going over things. The PowerPoint presentation isn't providing you any other information that you didn't get in your in the modified memo or in the staff report from the 12th. However, there may be one area that kind of goes over terminology a little bit more, just so that we can kind of make sure that all of us are on the same page on terminology. As the chair already said, the purpose of this is to relook at the motion to rezone the lot on the southeast corner of Beach and Boulder Drive to B1. It's providing supplemental information from our February 12th staff report. And it focuses on the items that were requested during the motion to postpone. Just a quick overview. This lot is on the southeast corner of Beach and Boulder Drive. It's currently zoned O district. For those of y'all who may not remember exactly what the O district is, it is essentially a holding zone. It has some development potential, but for the most part, it holds an area until the area is ready for development of some capacity. What we're proposing changing it to is limited business. The definition is up there on the screen. This PowerPoint will be uploaded onto the agenda center afterwards as well. But essentially, limited business aligns with the other properties in the area, and it continues to create an area that the Turner Track area plan had outlined, which is an area where people can work and live and transportation is much easier. The current use on that site is primarily for city stormwater detention. At the end of the slide, I'll show you guys exactly where the stormwater detention pond ends and where developable land could potentially be. During that February 12th meeting, there was a lot of concerns raised regarding the open space during the Turner Tract area plan. There is an area where the future land use is stated to be open space, natural area. That area is on the easternmost part of that property and is truly the area of this parcel that is not going to be easy to develop anyways. During that meeting, we postponed it to today for further analysis. This is the part that wasn't in your staff report, but it should be fairly self-explanatory. I'd like to kind of start this at a macro scale and kind of whittle it down to a more micro scale. The first is future land use. What is that? Essentially what that is a generalized plan showing the intended patterns of use and density and design characteristics of future development throughout the city. What we try to do during this is whittle it down so that people can see, like uses in an area and make sure that they're compatible with everything around it. Now, this future land use does correlate with zoning, but a future land use designation can cover multiple zoning types. We then have zoning, which is the first step and actually the first portion that is legally binding for our office in the city to adhere to. It delineates districts and establishes regulations governing the use, placement, spacing, and size of lands and buildings within those districts. Then you have land use, which is the current occupied or occupation or use of that land. And then you have the land ownership. The reason why I want to point out land ownership is particularly in this case, this parcel is owned by the city of Laramie. And in order to dispose of it, it has to go through a very public process. The detention pond in this parcel, as I'll state later on in the presentation, is crucial to our stormwater water management plan. And unless significant changes occur to that stormwater detention pond, it's either put somewhere else, it's undergrounded, it would have significant impacts citywide. Essentially, that would be first and foremost amongst the discussion if any portion of this land is sold or disposed of in any way.
I mean, do you think that the city realistically would sell that portion of the land that's the detention pond?
No, I think it's possible, but it is improbable. So it's a right that the city has to sell property that it owns, but there'd have to be multiple hoops that they'd have to jump through in order to make that happen, and a lot of analysis and potentially redevelopment. The first point I want to go over, and first point I went over in the staff report, is that parks and open spaces are highly important to the city of Laramie. We heard this throughout the comprehensive plan process, and we continue to hear it today. The city's Parks and Rec master plan was originally created in 1982, which goes to show just how important it has been in guiding the city. And it was updated in 2016. Essentially what it did is divided the entire city into 25 service districts. This is areas within the city and directly adjacent to the city municipal boundaries. And it helps with the determination of future parks and recreation capital improvement goals. The Turner Track was part of this. It's considered service area 10. And we've followed that plan pretty closely. What you see there is a current park. It's Gateway Park. It's right there at the corner of Boulder and Grand Avenue. You have the rec center. You have the future bike park that is going in there. And you have the future Rotary Park that's going in there off of Bill Nye. Essentially, in addition to that, you have other recreation and open space opportunities that are associated with the high school. That wasn't originally part of the plan, but then when the school district purchased that property, it became more integral to that plan. In the other plan, the Turner Track area plan, it does have its own definition of open space and does outline areas where it would like to see open space. So far, there's not, I think for the most part, we've seen growth compatible with that plan. And this specific development or this specific rezoning will not go against that. It just changes it a little bit. It doesn't. This is the difference between future land use and zoning. So the future land use within the Turner Tract area plan was, for this parcel, was open space and multifamily development. And open space is applicable within all zoning districts according to the plan. And just changing it to B1 will allow it to have that multifamily element on that property as well. So I've got a better picture of this at the end as well. The background of this is the drawings for the specific detention pond there at the corner. But as I said during the staff report, this pond is integral to this area. Most subdivisions do have a requirement to contain stormwater on property. During the PUD process for Grandview Heights, there was not that requirement, and instead we have this detention pond. So all of the stormwater from Grandview Heights goes to this detention pond, which then goes down to the Regency Pond across the street. And so it's much more part of, instead of just an individual pond, it's part of a stormwater system, which is going to be a lot harder to actually change. Now, just because it's going to be hard, it's not impossible. It's just highly improbable, like I said earlier. The cost to remove, relocate, or underground this pond would be in the millions of dollars. And as we talked about earlier, finding funding for this sort of thing could be somewhat difficult. But within this parcel, there is areas that are considered not essential to the stormwater management associated with this pond. That would be the area primarily on the southern end of the parcel, kind of moving up in a diagonal from the southeast corner to the northwest corner, essentially. As I said, I'll kind of show you another map that will illustrate this at the end. I also wanted to go through a quick outline of the development process, just so that you guys know that even if this change is made, this is not the end of the story for any development that occurs. So the first thing we do before any application is submitted is have a pre-application meeting. During this meeting, we bring together all the different departments to review a project and to talk about possible implications that it might have, or the process that it has to go through. Essentially, it allows each department to say, hey, these are the things you're going to need to focus on in order for us to approve it. The next step is rezoning. That's where we are right now, in order to have a table of acceptable uses and to make sure that a development matches those. Sometimes we do need to rezone. The next one in this specific case would likely be a lot line adjustment or a minor land division, depending on any sort of development that could occur. Essentially, we have findings that have to happen on there. I have them listed there and you all can read through them. But in order for those to be approved, they do need to meet all the required findings. This specific process would be administrative and would not come before you all. The next would be a site plan. Site plans are for permitted uses and do not come before Planning Commission. They're an administrative decision, but it goes through everything that happened at the pre-application meeting, all the findings that need to happen, all the concerns that needed to be addressed need to be a part of this site plan, and are reviewed by staff thoroughly. Finally, you have, and this is an if, would be a conditional use potentially. With the original submittal of this rezoning, there was the possibility of a multifamily development on site. And that would have required, even with the rezoning, to have a conditional use permit. And that would come before this body. So this is the opportunity for us to really get into the nitpicky details and present for, you know, the public to see any concerns and maybe require any additional studies or design criteria in order to be approved. One of the questions that we were hearing last time was if we needed a specific zoning area for parks and open spaces. And I will tell you that generally speaking, that's not a very good practice to do. Within the city, there's plenty of parks that are within a zoning district and are, you know, they're not at risk of being overrun by anything else. It does have to go before city council if the city council decides to get rid of a park and turn it into a multifamily complex or anything like that. I have a list of both parks and detention ponds and their respective zoning districts up here. And this is kind of ubiquitous, not only for us, but other cities as well. Having something just for a park is generally not great planning practice.
Same for detention ponds.
Same for detention ponds, yes. So yeah, just to kind of review things again, while there is the possibility of this site being fully developed, you know, every inch of it being developed, it's highly improbable because of the detention pond currently on site. And the Turner Track plan, which we would certainly bring up if there was a development on it that went against it. We continue to have a commitment to parks and open spaces and certainly to stormwater management because it improves the health, safety, and welfare of City of Laramie citizens. And even with this review, even with the concerns that have been brought up, the planning department still believes that the rezoning from the O district to B1 is still valuable and does not go against the Turner Tract area plan. And it is in alignment with everything that I talked about during the Z2306 staff report. I do have this map, which was included in your packet, which is essentially the design of the detention area over there on that corner. All of the darker topo lines are considered integral to the function of the detention pond. But I've also included a rough map of the area so you can see it in comparison to that original vicinity map that was provided in that original staff report. And yeah, I'm open for any questions if you have any.
Okay, so we'll just direct questions to Joe that we have amongst commission, and then we'll bring public comment in and then finish our discussion off of that. So commissioners, any questions for Joe?
Just one question, if you could bring back the last slide there with the map. There you go. All right, that is considered the red line is considered the drainage pond. Assuming that somebody comes in and builds something on the rest of that property, would they still be constrained to the standard detain your own water before they dump it into that existing pond?
So yeah, any site plan would have to comply with stormwater regulations outlined within code.
So
there would be detention requirements, and they would not be able to just dump everything into that pond.
Really?
Yeah. There's a certain amount that's allowed, but they can't dump everything onto it. You have the
So that's gonna reduce the developable area from the standpoint of buildings and structures.
Certainly.
On that southern.
Certainly, and you see it actually with the multifamily development to the east of it as well. It has its own detention area and it doesn't just dump into that pond. So
How much of the capacity of that is up
to
to whatever flows into it right now? Like is 25% left over? Is it 15? Is it?
that I don't know. I would have to follow up with our engineering department to figure that out.
It's pretty big.
It is.
Yeah.
Donald.
Now, I'm not a planner, and so I'm speaking from a position of ignorance, but I think folks who looked at the original plan for the Turner Tract saw green areas, and they were marked out in green areas. So that's what I see. That's the cleanest plan I've seen, which actually looks a little bit different to what I'm seeing there. It's actually bigger. Okay. So I guess I had several questions. One is the master plan. So there's the master plan for the city and there's the Turner Tract plan. And I think the Turner Tract plan was 1 year earlier than the master plan. Is that correct? Which plan trumps which?
The Turner Tract is newer than the master plan.
Okay. So that should be driving the bus, right?
Yeah, for the most part, that's what we would follow.
And I guess I disagree with the notion that open space, so-called undeveloped space, should be just a holding zone. I think when something like that is done, that's kind of a promise. We will keep this area as green space. So I guess what baffles me is, why don't you, if the area you wish to develop is that brown area, can you see it?
Yeah.
If that's the area you want to designate as an area where the B1 is going to be B1 zoned, rather than doing all, whatever it is, 14 and a half acres, why not just designate that area? I just don't understand why. I know you're saying that it's very unlikely that someone's going to build over a retention pond, but when you reclassify it as commercial, people are going to be concerned. So why not just do the small area that you think is best suited for development?
And that's certainly a possibility. We wouldn't necessarily be against it, but as the comp plan talks about, removing that O area when it's ready to be developed is kind of the goal. Ultimately, our goal is to remove all O areas from the map entirely because it's not good practice to continue to have holding areas. It's, even as an O area, as an O district, it has development potential.
Could you talk about that? There's like dwelling, live, work, and there's group homes and nursing homes and things
Yeah.
like that.
So we kind of discussed this last time. A zoning area cannot completely remove the right to develop, even if that's our own property. That's considered a takings, and the city of Laramie tries to avoid takings at all costs. It's a good policy, and it gets us out of legal trouble as much as possible. But even as an O district, develop, O district does not inherently mean open space.
Yeah, you got a whole list here.
Yeah, of things that are available. It limits, it's a very low density development area, but it doesn't reduce it. So I hear what you're saying about, B1 being concerning to people, and I recognize that. But it would be part of the review process and something that we would ultimately bring up as a concern where, hey, this isn't following the Turner Tract master plan or area plan. And it's starting to encroach onto that area that we said was open space, or we designated as future use of just open space. So.
I mean,
That
part of
being
it,
said-
part of it is open space. I mean,
Yeah, I mean,
you
part
know,
of it's-
the vast majority of it is open space and will
And will
stay that way.
continue to be, and actually, any development will contribute to that open space and the fact that there is. Trails that are delineated in that plan, and it will be the responsibility of the property owner to complete those trails. So anything that is touching there, they are responsible for completing. So anytime we see something in the Parks and Rec master plan, that is adjacent to a property that is developing, we try to incorporate that into the site plan as much as possible as well. So it's kind of hard right now because there's not a proposed development anymore. And that would have probably made this process a lot easier because I could have said, this is what's going there within the next year, 2 years, whatever.
Which is what you guys tried to do because you got a proposal from these folks
Right.
that are stated in this, in the staff report, and they couldn't get their funding, and so they pulled out. And that hierarchy that you showed, you know, it's talk to a developer, see if everything's cool, and then do the rezoning. And so they were following those steps.
Mhm.
And so what you're doing now is saying, we're gonna get rid of that. I mean, there'll still be that pre-development meeting, but there'll be no rezoning because it's all gonna be B1. It's gonna have a large variety of uses.
Mhm.
So we're kind of moving forward per this motion to approve is to sort of hijack that rezoning thing
Right.
based on a proposal. And saying the B1's got enough of what we want that most, you know, whether it's commercial or residential, will be allowed, and we get rid of that rezoning step.
Exactly. I will also say this is city property. Again, I want to highlight that fact. This is city property. We own it as a city council, who does hear roughly the same things that you guys hear, including the analysis of, you know, the comp plan or the Turner Tract area plan. We'll hear that for any development that happens. And so it's ultimately up to city council what portions they want to get rid of and what portions they don't. Any portion that doesn't align with that plan, they will hear that it doesn't and can ultimately make that decision.
So you know, it's clear that the retention part of the parcel is really off, and it's what to do with that south thing. So it's because it's city property, the city has the opportunity, or the rare opportunity of saying, what does the city want on that wedge of property there? Okay?
Yeah, and those sales generally occur
But-
according to wants or needs, you know.
But
Housing is a need within the community.
Right.
and
So
it's been focused.
if housing, which is the initial proposal, was talking about 72 unit thing. So if housing is what the city wants there, as opposed to a liquor store, which is allowed in B1, or a fueling station, or that are permitted uses in B1. If the city wants residential development there, then why won't you consider rezoning to R2? Or something that is just dealing with residential development?
So part of it was conformity with the area. There's an area right next to it that is already B1 and continuing
So
that, but also
maybe B1 was
fact-
a bad decision. Maybe,
Perhaps.
I mean, I'm kind of curious why they didn't propose to develop on that southern property that's already B1, rather than going through the rezoning process of skinning up against a detention pond. Why wasn't that B1 property, the proposal development?
well, partially because of the Turner Tract area plan, which designated multifamily kind of in that corner anyways.
Yeah,
That was
but B1's
But
ready
at
to
the
rock
same
and roll.
time, we wanted to have wise land use. And within the Turner Tract area plan, there was this idea of having both living and working kind of a more of a mixed use that we don't necessarily see in every area.
So the city wants commercial development and retail development in that wedge?
Yeah, well, according to the plan, that is
But
part of
does the city want that? I mean, you've got the city property, you've got the choice. The city has a choice to say exactly what they want there and zone accordingly.
Right.
And so let's make, why shouldn't the city make a decision of what they want in that wedge? It's right next to a high school. Okay, and so it would seem like that is a spot that says, we don't want a liquor store. We don't want a fueling station. Do we want the kids to go over there and buy burritos or a Cowboy Joe bling or not? I mean, it's near a high school, so I think the compatibility of the land use should match.
Well, and I wouldn't say that retail and education facilities are mutually exclusive endeavors. I mean, you see inner city schools have all sorts of things next to them.
Right.
We are not inner city, but having some retail options as part of this area is desirable, I think. And it has to be, the right proposal at the right time in order for that sale to happen. And ultimately, it comes down to city council.
Well, let me ask, so if somebody is zone B, if it's rezoned B1 and someone says, I want to put a liquor store on the corner and it's a permitted use, what's the city's and our planning commission ability to say, well, it's on the list of permitted uses, but we're not gonna agree with that because it's right across the street from the high school. Do we have that authority?
As a permitted use, no, you do not have that authority.
Okay, that's a problem for me. Yeah, and Derek.
Where do I want to start now? I'm just kidding. A couple quick things just to note. Whether the property is zoned O or B1, it provides no difference in protection of the open space area. Zero. The exact same level of protection exists because you are going to be relying on either staff or the procedural processes in code, so maybe a conditional use, to allow or not allow zoning per the Turner Tract plan, the green area shown in the master plan of the Turner Tract plan. So just making that really clear, right? Because ultimately what it comes down to is the staff, or let's say it's a conditional use and comes before this board, that we make sure that those trails get in there and that there isn't a building on the back corner, because the uses are permitted in both O and the B1 zoning districts. I mean, for instance, if you look at the chart, I can build a group home within the O zone. Could be 1,000-person group home that could span the whole wedge and not protect the open space, right? But that would go through that same site planning process and potentially, in this case, a conditional use process, which would come before this board, where we would want to ensure that those things like the trail connections that are planned in the Grandview Heights area to extend out to Boulder Drive are preserved. So that's one item I want to point out and make sure was understood. Number two, the practical reality of why the previous development proposal that was before you didn't go further south in the existing B1 area, which is right there at that line. The sewer doesn't exist. It has to go further north to be served under the current infrastructure that we have. That line there, it's actually a little bit south of that line. Technically, all the sewer would run south and then to the west, which we don't know. We don't have a line that runs to the west. That property right now is just undevelopable. We don't have the ability to provide sewer to that area today. As we do continue with the Bill 9 improvements, that is our hope. So it was a practical reality of why they've located further north. And then to kind of the last point, this idea about commercial activity in that space. If you look at the Turner Track Master Plan, mixed use residential is proposed for everything south of that line, which is what basically B1 does allows for those commercial and residential uses to exist together. Just that little corner, so kind of like north of that line, shows for R3. And that's, you know, or some just multifamily development, I think is what it says in the plan. I'll tell you again. Yeah, yeah, multifamily. And so that's kind of your, that's kind of your difference. You know, B1 just, it allows still for both. So, but
Okay.
yeah, down to the south, there likely will be potentially commercial uses in there, hopefully mixed with residential uses.
Dave. Oh, go ahead, Don.
So what I see, if I'm understanding this map correctly, the park area extends down, or at least the so-called natural landscape green space extends down here. Is that correct?
I think that's generically, yeah, that's exactly, it's actually a little bit, it's not quite that far. There's actually, if you look, there's a little lot between the houses right
Right,
there.
yeah.
See that?
Yeah.
That was platted as part of the future trail network. And there's another little small lot at the very other end, right where the kind of red point comes together, right there. Yep.
Right.
And we have 2 trail connections
Right.
proposed so that you can get out. And so that's kind of where the map shows. Yep.
So I guess my point is, let's say I bought this house and I looked at the Turner Tract plan and I saw all this green space that's here and extends down here. And then if the city turned around and said, okay, we're going to redesignate this as B1, even though, take our word for it, we're never going to, you know, do B1 development within that green space, you're asking for an act of faith on the part of folks. And personally, I wouldn't believe you. I mean, I would think, no, I bought this house. I was hoping I would be looking out on a green space. In fact, it's a very attractive green space if you drive by. Because I think those folks are up on a slight hill and they're looking down on this area. And when I drove by it the other day and I thought, oh, this is a really nice area. And I hope it's preserved as such. And it seems to me that folks living in that area, living along here, are justifiably concerned about the possibility that even though you say, trust us, we're not going to develop it, even though we're rezoning it.
I think they're saying that they will develop that portion. They're just not going to develop the detention pond.
Well, then you're departing from the Turner Tract plan.
Did I misspeak?
I would say you misspoke.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is that.
So that hasn't been made clear
It
that
can be
if
developed. I
if-
mean, it can be developed today. Someone could make a proposal today under the ozone to propose for a building to be there. Whether it makes it through our approval processes, whether it's administrative or comes before this body. And ultimately, I'll just say, and whether the council chooses to sell said property for said use in that location, which traditionally they have always wanted to know those details, it's not going to happen. But that's the most assurance we can give. We can't promise you anything more than that.
Okay.
And if I could also,
I'm confused. Okay, I mean, I'm under the impression this whole thing is gonna be B1. Okay, here's the detention pond. That is undevelopable by 99% because of the problems with it's needed. And so it is this area here, this portion here, which Turner Tract, this little wedge, the Turner Tract said should be open space. But if we go B1 or open is still saying this area here is developable either by what O is saying or by B1 or whatever rezoning we say. So you basically, Donald, you get rid of any promise of open space in this wedge.
But there's a promise in the Turner.
No, I get it.
if I could address that again, within the Turner Tract plan, it does talk about the zoning of future land uses, and that was included in the staff report. And it did say that open spaces align with any zoning district. So it's not us being necessarily disingenuous. You may be right. The visual aspects of the map may be more drawing than the table that talks about these specific zonings that are compatible with each future land use. But it does say within there that open space can be any zoning district.
And that's why I think the city, when it should have a category for, we want to keep this as a natural space. And I know you disagree, and I disagree with you, but I think there should be a zoning. And I guess to make the point more clearly, when something like that is, whoops, I just lost it. When something like that is done and it disappears from me, that seems to me like a promise and an assurance. And to put it in very blunt terms, if I was to have built my house based on that map, and then it was rezoned, and then it was quote unquote developed, although I always think natural space is already well developed ecologically, I would sue you. I would sue the city. And I don't know if that's a consideration.
So,
Mr. Chair.
yeah, Tom.
Is the reason for the B1 designation simply because that's what Cornerstone originally asked for? Or is B1 provide the highest and best use for the city as a seller of real estate? I mean, you've got a product that the city is looking for a customer for. So
I think that certainly, the B1 designation does offer a lot of different options, including that higher density development, but also a commercial aspect to it. I think that the request for B1 allowed for a couple of things. It allowed for the multifamily development to come in, but it also allowed for review of that multifamily development to maybe a higher degree than we would have gotten otherwise if it was just residential permitted by right zoning district at that location. So in some ways, the request to rezone it for that specific use was kind of shooting themselves in the foot in some ways, making it harder for them to get this through because it ultimately would have had to come before y'all for that conditional use review. That being said, as Chairman Moody has pointed out, there's other things within our other uses within that zoning district that do not need your review.
oh yeah, the richest man in Albuquerque owned a deli right across the street from Del Norte High, and it was only open from 10 till 3, but he made millions out of there. So yeah, right across from the high school. I'll open a deli shop if you make it a B1. I'm of two minds about this. I'm of the opinion that, the city has to be able to do with land as it is, but I'm also the opinion with Donald that things have changed so much. I was here when we did the original Turner Track, and when it came through and lots of promises were made at the time, a lot of them were kept and a lot of them weren't. So, I mean, the Turner Tract has proved to be a lot more flexible than it was originally envisioned. In practice, it's a lot more flexible than I think it was originally envisioned. But I see one of the problems with this particular lot is a good chunk of this from this point back here is pretty much undevelopable because of the hill. I mean, that's a fairly steep drop off. I don't see what you can build in there. I think building, if any, is only going to be limited to this parcel in the front, which is what I think Cornerstone originally was talking about. Yeah.
And what the open space thing.
And this, yeah, but
or
this
Turner
part-
Tracks it.
that's what the open space is. So I'm of two minds and I'd like to see the whole thing stay open, but I see economic development potential for that particular parcel there. I think if you subdivided it before you change the zoning, might, or as part of the zoning process, like carve out this little chunk here so that it would be along this line here and still leave all this open.
Yeah, Joe?
And Chair, that is a business and engineering decision when somebody decides to develop
Right.
this lot. They have certain things that they have to prove.
You can
They
cut and
have
fill.
to, yeah. They, with a certain amount of engineering, with a
Sure.
certain amount of dollars, you can make almost anywhere developable, right?
That's exactly right.
But that is a business decision for whoever decides to develop it. We're not in the business of getting involved in business decisions. And they ultimately have to prove and meet all of our codes and requirements in order to develop. Additionally, you talked about that line in all that area below. The request for an area that was, delineated as developable and non-developable was purely due to the confines of the detention pond itself. It wasn't looking at, the land type, the soils, any of that.
Right.
You all may very well be right, and that area may not be developable for the topographic reasons that have been expressed. But the area delineated in red is the area that is directly related to the detention pond. And unless millions of dollars float out of thin air, is highly unlikely
Right. No, I
to be developed.
think we get
And
that.
we would not
We get
suggest
that. Derek, did you have a question?
Yeah,
Comment?
Chair and Commission, I think just to provide maybe a little guidance, right, the proposal before you is to rezone the space that's O to B1. That's what's here for you to consider. If you choose not to do that, it remains O, right? So nothing would change in terms of, and then it would go to City Council for consideration. If you feel like the O zone provides some other level of protection that the B1 doesn't, or seems to construe some other different meaning, which the staff doesn't express that. We don't agree with you. But if you do, you could always propose that some of that remain O and that only a portion of that be changed to B1. And I say that based upon the conversation that you're having, is that front area or that area to the west is more apt to B1. What it would be is you have the one open space lot in the Grandview Heights to the south there. That's the far western one. Draw a line straight north of that up to the red line and leave all that O.
What was?
In the end, I think that's the question. You've kind of got a couple options, right? Don't change it, change part of it, or change it all.
Yeah.
And I think I'm just trying to provide some context to kind of seize based upon the conversation that you're all having.
And I think the last comment that I would make is that if we left it as O, then all you do is you follow that process that you showed. Someone comes in and says, I'd like to do A, B, and C. And you run it through them. And then, that way, if they say, well, I want to put in a liquor store, you can say, no, we're really not happy about that, or whatever. The city has a choice to say, this proposed development is what we want, what the community wants. It's a multifamily or a nice retail thing or whatever. And then you rezone based on a bona fide proposal. And then, we're not second guessing whether this is going to come in or that's going to come in or whatever. You're responding to what is being proposed to you, and you're rezoning accordingly. And you're identifying areas that quite clearly that are undevelopable and whatever. It seems like we can proceed right on through just leaving it as is and rezoning according to what is actually being proposed. Go there.
Yeah, just one final thing, just since it's been said about 5 times, just so you know, liquor stores and drive-in liquor stores are prohibited in all of the Turner Tract, even though it's permitted in the B1 zone. So it's an additional overlay. Just want to
Oh,
clear that up so we know that all the high school is not going to have a liquor store across from it. It's the last
Good to
thing.
know.
That is the last thing I need to come out of the conversation today, no matter which way you vote. So don't worry.
All right, so I have a point of order question. Do we need to have a separate motion, or does the original motion that we postponed still stand?
We're in the motion thing, and I need to hear from public before we.
Okay,
So.
I've got a
Jake.
question. Sorry, Joe, you sat down too quick. If a developer comes in and asks about a piece of property, do you direct them to the Turner Tract plan? Say, hey, this is plan, this is what the city envisions here. Not that they have to follow it, but they know largely they're gonna probably have some public discourse at some level. Do you make it a point to kind of demonstrate to them what the plans are out there and what you're kind of looking for, even if you don't have teeth to make them do it?
Yeah, so during that initial pre-app meeting, we go over Turner Tract plan or any other plan that is applicable to the area, and as well as the zoning. So it will be crystal clear. If they go against the Turner Tract plan, their application has to make a compelling argument why they are going against the plan, and ultimately they will know whether or not we will be in support of the development or not, according to their responses. And so a developer can push something through regardless of whether or not we think it's appropriate or not appropriate. I don't think you've heard it recently, but there's times where we would bring an application before you because at a developer's request with the recommended motion of denial because it does not meet certain criteria. I don't know the last time we did that because generally developers do not want to have us come up here, say why it's not appropriate, and then come up behind us and argue why it is. But yeah, so to answer your question in probably the longest way possible. Yes, developers know. We send it to them. We show them exactly the areas that they need to focus on, and the plans that they may be in compliance with or may not be in compliance with.
Okay. And so that being said, if this was zone O and somebody came in and wanted to build a multifamily home there, they could do it with the same restraints as if it was zone B1 or anything else that was compatible with sort of that zoning. And I used multifamily. I don't know if that's applicable to O zoning, but whatever the O zoning was, or some developer could have that potential. Whatever it was, you would share the plan with them and hope that they would comply to it.
Correct.
Okay.
Jonna, you have
I
a
have a
question?
question. I think I hopefully get a couple dumb questions too, since I'm fairly new. So if a developer comes, can they come and present something for a subset of that area, or must it be in its entirety?
So they can present something for a subset. Ultimately, if we are seeing development on that property, the city would like to no longer have ownership of that property. It would be transferring ownership in the sale. Chances are what you would also see, or maybe not see originally, but with the next stage of this would be a lot line division. So the lot lines would change somewhat to reflect the development itself, to encompass the footprint of that development.
And could a proposal all be commercial, recognizing that the aggregate is mixed use, right? And there's residential, so that, is there any ratio or constraint on the balance of different uses in a mixed use area. So like I said, could that whole thing become commercial?
I don't think that the Turner overlay specifically states like a ratio that has to occur within it. So it could be completely commercial, as long as it matches permitted or conditional, uses within that area.
Thank you.
I've got
Okay.
Yeah, sorry, Joe, I've got one more question for you. Is it typical with like the discussion of this detention pond, what you have outlined in red there? Is it standard, as you were just speaking with the lot line adjustment, that the city would retain ownership of that detention pond to guarantee maintenance access and all of that? Not that it's part of this immediate discussion, but sort of for my own edification of what does that typical process look like?
Yeah, for this specific one, we would retain ownership of it. There is some areas within the city that during their subdivision process, they had that as part of their HOA. But this, as it is currently, the city's, I think our engineering department would really prefer not to work through anyone else to make sure that this functions appropriately. And two, I don't know. I mean, there could be a developer who would want to take on the responsibilities of maintaining this detention pond.
Okay, that's what I thought, but thank you.
Donald.
So we still need to hear the public comments.
Right, this is just his comment between
Right.
us.
So what I'm thinking of, but I would need feedback from this group and from the developers or for the planning department. I would move to recommend the city council approve an amendment to the city of Laramie's official zoning map, rezoning an approximately 7.28 acre property.
Wait, we're,
No, I'm just saying, I'm thinking of making that proposal.
okay.
So that it's clear that the development would take place fronting here and here. And we'll leave this alone and this alone.
Okay, a topic for us to decide
Yes,
once
and
we
I'm
deal
willing
with,
to make-
once we
I'm
deal
willing
with
to
the
make that
motion.
Proposal if there's support.
Is there any other comments from commissioners? Okay, we'll open it up to public comment. You made it. State your name and.
I'm Michelle Bacon and I live at 3923 Little Moon Trail. If you count from the corner, 7 houses over, that's my house. It's been really interesting listening because the vocabulary used in the Turner Tract Plan and the vocabulary that is planning, zoning, don't really match. I mean, it's a little confusing. And so I'm going to speak to you as a resident who has limited facility with some of that language. But first, to thank you all for your work and for the energy and effort that you give for caring for our community. I really do appreciate that. I also come bringing a petition that's been signed by 8 of the 10 households that are along Little Moon Trail who object to this rezoning. But part of that is because I'm not sure if we really understand what that rezoning means. But 8 of the 10 only because 2 of those households were never home when I went by to check and see what they thought. I don't come as an adversary, even though I bring this petition. I don't think community development needs to be a zero-sum game of citizen versus city and conservation versus convenience, residential versus commercial. I think one party doesn't have to lose for one to win. And it's possible to find common ground that's beneficial to everybody. And I think that's the brilliance of the Turner Tract Area Plan of 2013. They brought together residential and educational and civic and commercial and green space within an identifiable neighborhood that was beneficial to all of those. And so I come asking that you honor my understanding of the TTAP of 2013 by maintaining the open space designation as defined in that plan on page 19, which says, this designation identifies land that will remain as green space, pathways, trails, and other areas that are generally undeveloped. The open space areas provide visual relief from buildings, structures, roadways, and other built developments. They can be publicly or privately maintained. And that you comply with policy number 1 on page 19 and 20 that say, require compliance with the Turner Tract Area Plan for any development proposed within the planning area boundaries. Refer to the adopted land use map, which you were doing, when reviewing rezone requests for compliance with the plan. Require developments to follow the design standards of the Turner Tract Area Plan. Honoring that plan still allows for multifamily development in that southwest corner of the parcel under consideration and maintains green space that is needed for that detention pond. I'm well acquainted with the work of Family Promise of Albany County, Climb Wyoming, Interfaith, and the Downtown Clinic, and so I am well aware of how much we need affordable housing. The TTAP provides for multifamily use and green space. In Wyoming, we're always trying to balance convenience with conservation. Honoring a designated green space may seem inconvenient, but it is a small and important act of conservation. And when all of the parcels in this Turner Tract area are developed, that green space is a very important oasis. Now, do any of you live in the Grandview Heights neighborhood? You mentioned driving by. That red square, when there is a heavy rain, is full. I mean, it's not like it's not the stream down the middle. That retention pond holds a lot of water when there's a heavy rain. And there are more and more houses being built in Grandview Heights, which means more and more pond, I would imagine, as time goes by. But that also means you have not seen in the early morning hours a red fox dashing through the high grass in that green space, or the pronghorn grazing or bedding down in the evening. It's a little piece of prairie in the middle of this busy community. And that's the beauty of the Turner Tract Area Plan. All of that is together. Convenience and conservation, residential and commercial, citizen and city able to flourish together. So my request is that you honor the Turner Tract Area Plan of 2013 and reject the amendment to change the zoning from open space to limited business use. Thank you.
Thanks.
But Tom?
Who would
Just a
like-
question. Ms. Bagan, just a question. Has the discussion here this evening clarified anything for you or made you more confused?
It just raises a lot more questions for me. Well, one of them is when you look at that master plan, who is responsible for creating the trail that's on that plan that goes from Little Moon on the two ends through the green space onto Boulder, where you are then at the high school and the rec center and all of that. We moved in 4.5 years ago. Many of the houses on our street weren't there. And we have eagerly been awaiting for when the access points become more than access points. About 2 years ago, I think they finished the trail that goes through the middle of the neighborhood and goes out to Bill Nye, and it's lovely. And we thought, oh, maybe they're gonna just keep finishing. And so I don't know whose responsibility that is to even ask, you know, who should be attending to that. And yes, if that trail is supposed to be there to connect, then that is also important green space that is part of that original plan.
Right. Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Mrs. Bacon, on the original plan, it showed there was gonna be a development here, and a
Mhm.
development here.
Mm-hmm.
Are you and your neighbors okay with that? You're not asking that that area remain green space?
No, I mean, are we thrilled about that? Because inevitably, if that's a multifamily, it's gonna be tall and that's gonna affect the view that we currently have. But that is part of the plan and that we knew that all the way, all the way down and across beach, which is all now open, anticipating that would be commercial, be multi-residential, whatever. But the space that's immediately behind us, which should have a trail, and the retentions pond or detention pond, anticipating just what the Turner Tract area map looks like.
Okay.
Not realizing that map and how things are zoned are really two different things.
Great.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, so we're back in our commission discussion. So so Donald, you wanted to entertain sort of an option and we can each talk about, our what might be adjustments to the motion or something different. We can have that discussion now before we vote on the motion, which is to approve.
Okay. So, I mean, my feeling is that we should reject the motion that is before us. Which is to rezone the whole, whatever it is, 14 and a half acres. It seems to me leaving it zoned as a ozone, which always sounds strange, is kind of odd. That's one option, and the other option is that if planning folks really want this to have the option of developing this area in accordance with the Turner Tract, we can make a proposal that a parcel which is on the east side of Boulder Drive, which is about 7.28 acres, be rezoned.
So Derek, go ahead, Jake.
Yeah, I just want to make maybe a point of order. I'm not exactly sure, but Donald, if I understand you correctly, I'm looking at this the Turner Tract area plan. There's an orange kind of rectangular rhombus, and then are you speaking to the brown section right directly below that, included into that, or just because that's not part of our discussion here
Right,
tonight,
it's
right?
just-
It's
it's
just
just that.
this area.
So if I can.
Right.
Give me a second here.
I think we would ignore that southern
Anything
B1.
south of that
Right,
black
right. It's
line,
just
yeah,
that,
because that's not part of anything that we're
Exactly,
proposing.
that's
We
a
don't wanna
non-issue.
open up a can of worms with that, but I mean, if we have a problem with whatever, we're being presented, I think we could just simply say that we recommend that the city council recommend or require that the planning commission, I don't know how that would work, but only allow development per this thing, but it would probably take a subdivision to go through that process to chunk off that single piece to allow for only that piece to be developed. Am I correct, Derek? Am I wrong? I mean, it seems like just the city council can't dictate what happens on a piece of property that they sell. And if it's only that parcel that is in question, it needs to be specifically and legally set aside.
Chair and commission, I mean, really, the only question before you is what I mentioned earlier.
Up or down?
Keep it all low. Change it to B1. I guess you could propose a whole different zoning district. That's, I guess, another option I wasn't really thinking about, but I guess it's an option. Or only zone a portion of the property. If you're looking at just that brown area that's in the Turner Track plan, if you were to make a recommendation to only rezone that area and leave the rest O, you're looking at it's about 4.1 acres. And and basically what we did is if you take that open space lot that's on the far western edge, just drew a line straight up there and take that corner and rezone only that corner. Yep, right there, just like that. It's a very logical.
You just say that you follow the Turner Track,
And then what you're doing, and all you're doing there is you're simply in your rezoning request, at least. Even though we don't agree that the O does anything different in that space, because it's not open zoning, it's O zoning. But it's less uses, I guess. I mean, if that's, that then makes it clear that that's the area you're really saying, yep, that makes sense with the plan. The other stuff, just leave it as is for now.
it's the best we can do.
And it is what it is. And then that allows for council to make their decision when it gets before them, if that makes sense for them. Generally, we stated in the very first meeting that was an option, but we just went for the rezoning of the whole parcel. There's continuity in that. To speak to member Schneider's question, just that this board and really council also doesn't have the authority. If the uses are allowed within those zoning districts, they can't preclude those uses unless when they sell the property, if they choose to sell the property, place private restrictions, though usually through a deed restriction. And council does that routinely. We did that when we worked with the owners of the Kmart property. We signed an agreement with them that certain uses would go there because they were going to generate certain tax revenue. In the Turner Tract, we've done it multiple times. The corner of Crystal Court and Beach Street is the senior housing complex. Those were lots owned by the city. When we sold those, part of our agreement to sell those, so it's in the actual contract, it said it had to be senior living, had to have a certain amount of units. If they would have come in and proposed something different, it would have been a breach of contract. And so that would be something that would come probably at a later stage through the sale, because someone might not want all 4.1 acre. They might want 2 acres or 1 acre. And then that's when we would see subdivision, contracts for sale, all sorts of potential options that we just can't think of now.
If I may, Derek,
Yeah.
as zoning would require a higher level of scrutiny from both planning and city council before, because you would have to get a zoning change if somebody comes along to develop it.
No, incorrect.
Okay,
Yep.
then I'm wrong.
I mean, zoning allows for things like boarding houses, fraternities, group homes, retirement centers, nursing homes, hospice care, art galleries,
So,
museums.
Whether we change it to B1 and leave it as O,
I mean,
it's still wide open.
those uses though would still go through the standard development process where we would, look at open space concerns. We would look at the Turner Tract plan for guidance. The only thing I can directly tell you about like this property specifically was with the Cornerstone project. With the Cornerstone project, they were looking at locating kind of in that area that we're talking about, that, reasonable per the Turner Tract plan guidance. And they were going to build trails in that created those connections from the Grandview Heights over to Boulder. I mean, part of their development project, it would have come before you for consideration as well, but we never got, we're not there anymore. That's just not what it is.
Real quick, can you speak to Mrs. Bacon's question about who's responsible for the building of those trails? Is it the developer or is it?
I mean, right now the city owns that property. I mean, the city could go in and build trails today if we wanted to and had desired the budget or, desired to do that through a budget process and things. We haven't done that yet. A lot of times we wait for the a developer. So like if we were to sell that property, for them to build those improvements at that time.
Yeah, I know. So Sylvia, you have a question?
Yes, thank you. What about rezoning that 4.1 developable acres into R3, not B1? To be in line with the multifamily Turner tract expectation.
I mean, it is an option. It's somewhat islandy in terms of it's kind of out there by its own in a R3 zone. The closest R3 zone is further over by Beach Street. The B1 process also allows for the ability for the multifamily to go through conditional use process, which provides some higher level of scrutiny, which we felt was somewhat important. I think Joseph had mentioned that during his during his report out. So, I mean, that's another option.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, that's good point. So, any other, we've got half an hour before we turn into pumpkins. So, let's see.
I have a question I have is, as, again, Nancy might be able to answer this. Do we need a new motion to approve, or does the original motion that we had and then postponed still stand?
So the postponement's already been taken care of because we brought it back to today's meeting.
Okay,
So the motion as it stands right now is to approve the request for rezoning to B1. So if the planning commission would like to make an amendment to that motion, you can amend your motion to approve. So you could change that to, however, whether that's the 4.1 acres or however you want to change that main motion.
Or we could deny, or we could just vote straight up on the approval and let it go where it goes, and then come back with another motion to address what we think. And I think the basic question is whether, let's just say if we developed a motion to deny.
well, no, all I'd do is call the question and then it'd be up or down vote. At that point.
But then if we denied it, it just goes to city council to say, no, we don't agree with this. And whether Derek, if you guys came back to us with another rezoning that sort of addressed our concerns, would that be the way to go, or should we go this amendment way?
If you're comfortable with a different option, go that option, because my plan will be to bring something to the city council for them to consider. If you just deny it, you're not providing them any guidance. Other than that, you don't want any of it. And if that's what you want, then make that.
So we would leave it, we would leave it at O, and it would just move through that process that you defined.
But it will go to city council, and there's no guarantee we'll ever bring another zoning amendment before you on that property, depending upon what happens at council. I don't know what'll happen at council. So, yeah, I mean, that's.
Okay, so commissioners, what do you think?
So we can vote down the current proposal, and that's what I would like to do. But the city council could benefit from guidance from us, correct?
If we approve a motion that says this is what we think.
So
We would have to amend this motion. The motion on the table would have to be amended.
Okay, so
I would like to propose an amendment, and I'll read out what I think the amendment should say. And Derek, if I'm not being geographically specific enough, you can tell me.
Okay, so let's have a little discussion about this. So if the amendment is going to be that southwest corner, do we want it to be zone B1? Do we want it to be zoned R3? Are we good as, or do we have a discussion that B1 is what we want?
Well, I think, just to be fair to the city, B1 gives the city the widest possibilities for a parcel they want to sell. And, and also gives them the opportunity to provide scrutiny over that parcel too. So I'd say if we're gonna divvy that chunk off, B1's as good as any.
Derek, is
John,
that
you have a
correct?
question?
Is that correct, Derek?
I mean, B1 provides a different, different uses allowed than R3, right?
Yep.
B1 is more commercially oriented, but like when you're looking at those residential uses, your scrutiny, and I say that in terms of things like, for instance, your multifamily development is permitted in the R3 zoning districts, i.e. would not come before this body. Conditionally, though, is approved, the B1 zone would come before this body. Same would go for townhouse dwellings. Live work would be conditional use no matter what. More mixed use product is just a permitted use in that zone. So you could even, that maybe affords a little bit less. Most of the other things like boarding and housing, lodging rooms are exactly the same. They're conditional uses, fraternities and sororities, same. Group homes, conditional use would come before you in both zoning districts. Retirement centers are permitted uses in both zones, so they wouldn't come before this body. So it's a little bit more restrictive when you're talking about true multifamily housing. There's some nuances though between the two zoning districts.
But if somebody wanted to build, let's say, a 12-story multifamily dwelling, you would have the option of saying no.
I mean, in a B1 zone, it would be a conditional use and it would come before this and you would all have the option to say no as well. I mean,
I would hope so.
yeah, 12 stories isn't allowed in B1, just, I like to keep all non-facts as much as I can. I don't need to panic anybody.
Okay.
Same with
These are
liquor
alternative
stores.
facts.
Okay, so, you want to talk about an amendment, Donald?
So I would like to make an amendment to the current proposal that's on the floor,
The motion.
right? And it would change it, and I'll read it out. Okay. I move to recommend that the city council approve an amendment to the city of Laramie's official zoning map, rezoning an approximately 4.1 acre property along the east side of Boulder Drive, south of the current retention pond, from O district, in parenthesis O, to limited business district, parenthesis B1, according to the findings of fact and conclusions of law.
That work there?
Second,
Okay,
Well,
I have a question
We
about-
have to have
I
have
have-
a discussion.
Well, we've got to run
Just a
the
second,
main motion. We got to run the main motion first before we can do an amendment to it.
Well, no, we can approve the amendment,
Correct.
right? so-
Yeah, at this point, you have a motion made for the amendment and a second. So you can discuss the amendment that's on the floor. You can go to public comment on the amendment, and then you vote on the amendment before you go back to the main motion, because that amendment then changes your main motion.
Gotcha. Okay,
If it's approved, if it's denied, or, if it fails, then you stay the same.
okay, so discussion amongst us on the amendment.
I guess I don't quite understand the value of separating that. O is still open, so there's no protection there. Now the city has two pieces of property to sell, one that's O, one that's B1, right? Because now they're separate or could be sold separately. So I don't know, wouldn't it be better to leave it O and hope for someone to bring a proposal that would be mindful of the Turner Track Plan holistically?
Chair and Commission, the rezoning would not actually divide the property in any way other than the parcel would be zoned two different zones. That happens. It's not that consequential to us. It is just designating the area a little bit more reflective of what the Turner Track plan shows. Is really all, we're inching towards more to what the plan shows versus what the O zone is, which has limited uses. You know, once again, I mean, our original recommendation is just to rezone the whole property. But in the end, this still gets us further down the road and I mean, it's still getting us further into conformance with the Turner Track plan. We're okay. This is an okay option. This is fine discussion. So, I mean, I don't think for us, it's not very consequential. I mean, we may have to come back before you someday because someone has a different proposal. That happens all the time. Like, we try to do our best to try to understand and try to predict what we think makes sense, but also too, we're wrong. We're wrong sometimes. It's the honest answer. So.
Thanks, Derek. Any other questions from commissions on the amendment? Okay, well,
Public comment on the amendment?
public comment. Is there any public comment? Thank you, Tom. Any public comment on the amendment? Okay, Michelle, you better go fast. We're running into.
Just that I appreciate the trying to conform to the Turner Track. Just that I appreciate that conforming to the Turner Track area plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Final comments from commissioners on this amendment?
So I was going to add, in conformance, move to recommend that in conformance with the 2013 Turner Tract Area Plan, blah, blah, blah.
Is that
Just so that it's clear, we think the Turner Tract Plan is the one we should be following, and the zoning designation should be appropriate.
very good?
Your second is fine with that too.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Roll call vote on the amendment.
Matamore,
Aye.
Heisler White,
Aye.
O'Toole,
Aye.
I cannot remember.
Priscilla.
Thank you.
Aye.
Schneider,
Aye.
Moody.
Aye.
That's 6 yeses and 0 nos, your chair.
So amendment passes. So now we're back into the main motion of approval. Should we change
Well, I
to
think,
that motion needs to be amended from the
I
standpoint
think we
of
should
it
just add, I don't know, Nancy, I'll ask you, but at the end of that motion, we just add as amended.
according to findings of fact and conclusions and as amended.
So your current motion that you have on the floor now is to recommend that the city council approve an amendment to the city of Laramie's official zoning map, rezoning approximately 4.1 acre property on the east side of Boulder Drive from O district to limited district, to limited business district B1, according to findings of fact and conclusions of law in conformity with the Turner Tract. Yeah, plan, the Turner
Can I
Tract plan.
read out what I typed?
Well, she just that works.
That's what the main motion is
Okay,
right now.
That is
we've-
That's the main
great.
motion, right?
Yes, yep.
Any-
As the original maker of the main motion, I'll call the question. Let's vote on it.
Okay. Roll call on this motion. The main motion.
Matamore,
Aye.
Heisler White,
Aye.
O'Toole,
Aye.
Priscilla.
Priscilla, thank you. I'm sorry. Schneider,
Aye.
Moody,
Aye.
and 1 vacant seat. So that's 6 yeses and 0 nos, Chair.
Okay, so motion passes as read. So do we have a motion to adjourn? I
So
believe-
moved.
Second? I believe we are. Everything,
think we're
that's
done.
it, that's it. All those in favor of adjournment, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, say nay. Okay, we're adjourned. Thank you, everybody. 15 minutes to burn.
What happens at 6:30?
I don't know.
I have a. I should have extended it longer to
Oh.
I just didn't.
Thanks, Donald.
Okay, you're welcome.
Good job.
Okay.
Was it revisited? I don't know, it's great to mark the